Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the New England Revolution in the season preview. So, despite the fact that they were kind of a little bit quiet this off season, I mean, they didn't make a lot of big signings. Most of their signings are mostly youth players. They obviously filled out the biggest need that they need this off season. It's not often I say coaching is a thing that is their biggest need that can dramatically improve MLS teams off season, but that's exactly what the New England Revolution did. I mean, I think everybody, including myself, and especially if you follow this team closely, know that coaching was a huge issue with this team. Caleb Porter clearly was not it for this team. He was clearly holding this team back, and the fact that he lasted that long, like he did last season, before they finally mercilessly fired him, just kind of shows you that the fact that the refs fan base are a little bit frustrated in terms of even the front office, the fact that they kind of let the leash of Caleb Porter longer than they should have been. But obviously, like I said, they admit the mistake of finally firing Caleb Porter, and I'm very high on their new head coach that they hire in Marko Mitrovic, and I'll talk about exactly why that is the case in terms of talk about the big question. But last season they finished 9-9-16 and finished with 36 points. Obviously, they did not make it to the playoffs. In fact, the last two seasons they didn't make it to the playoffs. Last season, as I mentioned, 9-9-16, 36 points. Previous season, almost similar, except more losses. 9 wins, 4 draw, and 21 losses that they suffer in 2024. Yikes! I mean, anytime we rack up 20 plus losses, you know you had a bad season, and they finished which just 31 points, didn't make it to the playoffs. In 2023, this is the last time they made it to the playoffs, 15-10-9, and finished with 55 points. But they lost to the Philadelphia Union in the first round, but it kind of didn't feel like they made it to the playoffs that year. I mean, that year was just such a turmoil year for the New England Revolution, especially what happened near the end of the year. That ugly situation with Bruce Arena and one of their assistant, I believe it was Richie William, that is, and that this team just completely fell apart after that, and unsurprisingly, losing to the Union in the first round. In 2022, they finished with 10-12-12 record and finished with 42 points, didn't make it to the playoffs. And in 2021, this is by far the most successful season that the Revs have had, and is actually one of the most successful team we ever seen in MLS history, with the New England Revolution finished with a 22-7-5 record, finished with 73 points. That was the benchmark when it comes to the most points ever by an MLS team, except that, of course, was broken just a couple of years ago by Inter Miami. But back then, this was the most points with 73 points, but they lost to NYCFC in the second round. And the big thing about that playoffs and the big negative for New England in that playoffs is the fact that, to this day, I think Rams fans are still very upset with the way the league scheduled their first playoff game and giving them almost 3.5 weeks of rest before playing against NYCFC, a team they've already played in the previous week and definitely looked like had the momentum. And yeah, you can kind of see that the Revs they just lost all the momentum and just when you're off for that long of a period, you basically lost your match sharpness that they pretty much had throughout the entire season, and you just kind of wonder, if they didn't have that long break before their first game, maybe they probably would have gone all the way to win MLS Cup. I mean, that's how unstoppable that New England Revolution side was in 2021. So their last playoff appearance is 2023, and they're still looking to win their first ever MLS Cup. So this is one of the few charter teams that have never won MLS Cup when they came into the league as original charter back in 1996, but not because of lack of trying. I mean, as always say, this team is kind of like the Buffalo Bills or even the Minnesota Vikings of MLS, because this is a team that have had some great seasons in the past, have made it to MLS Cup multiple times. In fact, they made it to 5 MLS Cup, and they unfortunately have the undubious honor of losing all 5 MLS Cup. But it's been also a while since New England has made it to MLS Cup. In fact, I think last time they made it was like in the mid 2000s, that is. So it's been a bit of a drought, and that they're definitely looking to trying to get back to that stage and maybe finally win their elusive first MLS Cup. And maybe the sixth attempt is the attempt that they finally get over the hump and win their much overdue first ever MLS Cup in franchise history. Now, looking at some of the transfers, so like I said, they didn't make a lot a big signing, but they definitely made a lot of good young signing with the likes of Brooklyn Reigns coming from the Houston Dynamo, Griffin Yao coming back from MLS after he had a stint with DC United before he went to Europe. Ethan Krutlier, very no name at least for me because I actually watched him play when he was with Quakes 2 as well. He was actually went to Europe with Werder Bremen. Didn't really do too much about with that team, and now coming back to MLS with New England. And then their MLS Super Draft signing is Schneider Mimi, who I believe he's now playing with the second team, the New England Revolution 2 in MLS Next Pro. Now, looking at players that's no longer on this team, so Thomas Shankalainen, he is now with Minnesota United. This was kind of part of a salary dump that they had where they didn't really so Thomas Shankalainen for pretty much almost nothing, but the salary that they had with him, you just kind of had a sense that they had to get rid of that salary, and that's exactly what they did. They also let go of Alex Bono, who, by the way, is now going back to DC United, a team that he actually had a stint with just a couple of years ago. And then they also let go of Brandon Bai, who's now with the Portland Timbers. Wyatt Omsford, who of course announced his retirement, and they also decided not to permanently sign Ignacio gonna go as he's now back in France. Now, looking at the first 5 games for New England, it's a very tough first game that they have to go to Gio Park face against of what I think is one of the top team in the Eastern Conference this season in Nashville SC. Then they go on the road to face against the New York Red Bulls before facing the Houston Dynamo at home. Then they got Cincinnati at home before going on the road to face against St. Louis. So again, it's a mixture of easy and hard opponents, something we have seen a lot throughout my time doing season preview, where it feels like a lot of teams, in their first 5 games or their last 5 games, it's a mixture of easy and tough opponent that they have to face. Now, looking at the last 5 games, they got the Chicago Fire at home on October 17th before going on the road to face against the Philadelphia Union. Then they play against the New York Red Bulls at home before playing against Inter Miami. Most likely going to be a sold out crowd again. As it's been the case the last couple of years when they face against Miami at Gillette Stadium. And then for the Decision 8 game, they have to go on the road to face against Orlando City, a match that maybe could have some heavy playoff aspiration, especially we'll talk about Orlando City in the season preview relatively soon. The fact that, yeah, these two teams could potentially be right there in terms of battling for playoff position down the line as well. Now, look at the strength of this team. Now, it's not very often I say a starting 11 is the strength of the team. Usually, when I say that, it means that this team is a very good team when it comes to being competitive and maybe a contender in the East. But the reason why, even though I don't think New England is considered a contender in the East, I do really like their starting 11. I think their starting 11 is a really dark horse kind of starting 11. People don't give enough credit how good the starting 11 is. I mean, starting with the attack, obviously, Carlos Hill is still considered to be one of the top 5, number 10 in this league. He's still the key of this attack, and even though he is starting to get a little older, he still is going to pull the strength of this team. And I also like the number 9 that they of course signed last off season, albeit controversially. Of course, they signed Israeli number 9 Dort Torgerman, who did really well in his short time doing his stint with New England, and now we'll see whether or not if he can continue that goal scoring thread which he had last season, even though he only play free game as well. The Griffin Yao signing, I think that's a good signing as well. We saw how good he was with DC before going to Europe, and I think he's going to bring that to New England, especially, it's kind of interesting. He decided to come back to MLS. He wasn't really doing that bad during his time in Belgium, so kind of weird to see him decide to take a step back and going back to MLS. The midfield also is pretty good as well. The Yusuf and Reigns pairing should be very good. Brooklyn Reigns will be probably the most key player out of these 3 players that I think that they signed this off season, because we know the potential that he of course bring. We saw it during his time with the Houston Dynamo, and now he's going to be going to this New England team that not only will give him more minutes, but Marko Mitrovic, he knows a lot about Brooklyn Reigns. He was part of the team that Marco, or the U.S. Youth National Team that Marko Mitrovic was coaching, and he used him a lot during the time when he was still with the Youth National Team. So I think he's not only going to get more minutes with the Revs, but this is kind of the season where I wouldn't be surprised he might have a breakout season for New England, just like what I thought could have happened with him when he was with the Houston Dynamo. And then of course on the defensive end, I do like the backline partnership of Fafana and Savaggio. And don't forget Matt Turner is still there. In this team. Now his loan does expire before the World Cup begin, but there is a option to make that loan permanently. And if Matt Turner can look like the guy he was a couple of years ago, especially on that supporter shield winning and record breaking points total winning team that New England was in 2021. Yeah, I think this team you can really see that sneakily the starting 11 is actually really decent. Could be a huge dark horse in the Eastern Conference. Now, the biggest weakness I think with this team is depth. The depth when you look at this team and the quality of it, it's not great. I mean, and this is where as good as their starting 11 is, and when they of course are healthy, well, what happened when they are not healthy? What happened if injuries start to happen? And as the old saying goes, injuries does happen for this season. Every single team's gonna have to go through injury setback. You'll be very lucky if you can go through an entire season without having major play suffer some injury setbacks. So yeah, if that of course is the case, then you look in the depth, and unfortunately, the depth of this team is not good whatsoever. I mean, there are a lot of players that is a huge downgrade compared to some of the starters to this team, especially at the back as well. Well, I think the depth at the back is definitely not great if they are going to have some of their back line missing times throughout this season. So that might be something that they might have to address heading into the remaining of this offseason, or maybe even in the summer transfer window as well. Or maybe they'll promote with it, because I think that's kind of the one thing I was expecting with New England, and the fact that, with them bringing a youth national team head coach in Marko Mitrovic, he's going to trust a lot of his youngster, and we already know that New England does have one of the better academy in the league. They have shown before, where they can develop some good young players and eventually sell them off for a huge amount of money. But speaking of Marko Mitrovic, that's where we first talk about the first big question of them. And I think this is definitely going to be something that could really set the tone in terms of how this team will do. And that, of course, is, will Marko Mitrovic, can he, of course, get the best out of this player? Something that Caleb Porter clearly did not do. I think so. Again, I'm very high on him, mainly because when you look at some of the head coaches that's been recently hired that has history with the national team, both in the youth level or even as an assistant with the national team. Most of them have done pretty well. I mean, Mikey Veras, a former assistant with the U.S. National team. Yeah, we saw what he did last season with San Diego. Turns out to be one of the most impressive season we have ever seen by an expansion team. In fact, it's not even one of the most. It's probably the most impressive season we have seen an expansion team has in the regular season. Greg Berhalter, former U.S. men's national team head coach, finally ended the curse that the Chicago Fire has in terms of the playoff drought. Even Bruce Arena, I know he didn't get the Quakes to the playoffs, but that was a very entertaining Quakes team to watch as well. So it's been proven, the fact that the last couple of head coach that have national team pedigree, they turns out to really turn their respective team around and at least make them respectful. And I am high on the fact that Marko Mitrovic can do exactly that. Especially again, this team, when you look at the Rams have heading into this season, I think this team should be good enough to make it to the playoffs. The reason why they weren't good enough, at least in the last couple of years, like I said, it goes back to what I said about Caleb Porter just kind of really holding this team back, and I do believe that Marko Mitrovic will not do that, and I think he's definitely going to get the best out of the players. And when they do get the best out of players, watch out. This team can definitely get themselves back to be maybe close to being a contender in the East as well. And then of course we talk about the Young signing as well. So I kind of already talked a little bit about this with Brooklyn Reigns. I think he's going to be a huge part to this midfield for the Rams, whether playing in a number 6 position or even a number 8. But what about the other two in Griffin Yao and Ethan Collier? Now, Ethan Collier, I think he's probably just going to be more used for depth reason on the defensive end. He's probably the best defensive depth option that they have. Griffin Yao, I think he's going to be pretty good in terms of sparking the attack on the from the wing spot as well. So I think these young signing can definitely make an impact both on all fronts as well, and especially I wouldn't be surprised if they will get some minutes as well because again, Marko Mitrovic, I have a feeling he's going to really believe it in his young players heading into this season. And then last but not least, we talked about Carlos Hill before, whether or not, of course, he still has it. That will be an interesting question to see because as the old saying goes, Father Time is undefeated, and eventually Father Time will catch up to Carlos Hill. But as it stands, I mean, he's still producing at a pretty elite level. Yes, he has had some injury concern, and that's kind of the thing that maybe the refs might be a little bit concerned with the way that if he does go down with injuries, who's going to really step up in that number 10 position and really take that mantle because we've seen before it's not easy to replace Carlos Hill. But when he is healthy, I think he's still going to be the maestro of this team. He's still going to be the heart and soul and the metronome of this team as well. Pretty much everything goes through the attack for New England is going to go through Carlos Hill. It's been that way ever since they bought him back in 2020, and it's not going to be any difference. He's definitely going to produce, and now under Marko Mitrovic, I think not only he'll get the best out of him as well, but really make this attack much better than what we've seen in previous season as well. So look at prediction. I think where the Rams can finish. For high, I'm kind of being pretty generous of putting them in fifth position, pretty high up in the standings as well. I was actually tempted to maybe put them in the top four as well, but knowing the East is an absolute bloodbath, maybe that's a little bit of a reach as well, especially for a first year head coach. But I think this team will definitely be better than what we saw last season in the previous season as well. The low, I'm gonna put them in 10th place as the floor as well, and that's not bad too. I mean, I think this team definitely will not be having a repeat of what they've seen in the last two seasons. This is going to be a competitive team. This team will definitely they will be competing for playoff position by the end of the season. And if that, of course, is the case, I think it's a successful first season for Marko Mitrovic. I mean, you can clearly see that this team has the potential of getting themselves back to where they were a couple of years ago, of considered to be a cup contender as well, and especially with them continue to building, and maybe even Marko Mitrovic might be thinking about bringing some of his player along, and maybe New England once again develop some really good young talented player as well within their academy. As I said, this team could be back to being competitive and could be once again a contender in the East as soon as this upcoming season or maybe even next season as well. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to like, smash the subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video. And if you're a Revs fan, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, the three big question, and your prediction of what's the highest they can finish and what's the floor that they have, and also the expectation that you think this team could have heading into this season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.